Getting back onto the Acropolis, I had to grab a blanket. It's a bit chilly down here. It was absolutely amazing in every way, and it was amazing to see, to try and visualize what it was like before. Like when we went to was a construction site, like there were cranes and scaffolding, but it was a real test to the imagination to see how it was before when they had first built it, when it had been full of color and full of full-grown statues and whatnot. So, and another highlight, I was running on the track in ancient Olympia. So in ancient Olympia, there was a long track, I think it was about 50 or 75 meters long, and they did they did most of their things there. They would have done archery, discus, javelin throwing, and running. And so we did races at within the tour group. So like 10 people would go at a time, and they'd run down to the end. And the end was it was pretty exhilarating to be running the same place where so many of the first Olympians were. So if that was an incredible, and really it was a fun day to be there. It was also sweltering hot, but it was good. The hot wind in the hair was a relief. And couple things I've never done before. Um, they have a special kind of Greek chess. So the chessboard is in a circle, and in the middle, it's like some of the tourist boards will have like the Parthenon or the ancient Olympia or a statue in the middle, and the pawns are like the players are maybe Spartan warriors or like the gods. So my mom and I would mess around with the Greek chess. So that was lots of fun because all you do is you just the squares, instead of going straight, they kind of curve. So once you get to the middle, you just jump over and go to the next bit. So that was lots of fun. And also learning how to make pottery. We went to go see how pottery was made, so it was really cool. He just while we were sitting there, he made a beautiful base of a vase, and it was lots of fun. And how they painted it to make it look old and everything. We learned about the cup of justice, which was absolutely hilarious. It was to weed out the greedy people, because it's just a regular like a goblet, but in the middle it's like a little pillar, and the pillar comes up about 3/4 of the way up the cup. And if you fill it up to the 3/4 mark, that's perfectly fine. But if you fill it any higher than that, everything in the cup will drain out of the bottom. Everything. So it was really funny to learn about that, and we saw it being demonstrated as well, which is lots of fun. And my favorite foods in Greece were olives. Oh, they are everywhere, and they are so good. The tzatziki was amazing, and the hummus. When we were on the island of Rhodes, I had the best hummus in the world. It was absolutely delicious. And finally, moving on to Italy. Again, I learned lots about the history and Roman mythology. I knew more about architecture for Italy and history than I did about Roman mythology, so it was interesting to learn about that. And I also learned about ancient Roman and Renaissance architecture as well, like when we went to Florence. It was absolutely amazing. It was just overwhelming, all of the amazing architecture and statues that were everywhere. And one of my highlights was seeing the statue of David, which was it was just it wasn't very tough or anything. Like many statues portray different emotions, for newer statues, but also the big bulging muscles. David was like dainty. not in that he was a skinny little shrimp, and that he was finely toned and he was just waiting, and like it's a really hard feeling to describe while seeing David. And another one of my highlights in Italy was, since it was my mom's birthday when we were in Venice, we got a private gondola tour through the canal, and it was beautiful, and it was so great. Sweet pea, it's okay. And it was so great. That's my cat meowing at me to come and give him some attention after 3.5 months. It was so great to see everything from the water. Like, as you go through the canals, you see people's back doors open, like people's back doors, because they'll have their front doors to go to the streets and their back doors to go to their boats. And it's crazy because the floods can actually go like 5-10 meters above the water level. So it was crazy to see how high it would go in the flood season. And although the Vatican is technically a different country, it was one of my highlights to be able to walk around the Vatican. It was amazing to see St. Peter's Basilica, for one. Was beautiful, and it was difficult to describe again because it's full of so much information and history. Like, we were able to see paintings done by so many different artists, and we were able to actually go see the Raphael rooms where we see the works of students of Raphael's, and then to see tapestries, and then going to the Sistine Chapel. It was phenomenal. The ceiling was just phenomenal and beautiful, in the walls, and it was kind of ironic because you're supposed to be like dead silent in the Sistine Chapel, and then they have the PA system, which is so loud, it is absolutely insane, and they don't stop talking over the PA system. And even if you did talk a bit while the PA system was going on, it's fine. You'd have to shout like you were at a rock concert. But again, it was amazing, and we got to see where the popes lived, and we actually got to see one of the things I've never seen before is I've never seen like a pope in real life, and not many people have. Of course, the popes I saw were the dead ones in the basilica. So I guess it's all a matter of perspective. Like, I saw the popes, but I didn't actually see them. So it was interesting. And actually, in St. Peter's Basilica, on the main stretch in the basilica, they have markings along the floor of how large the other, like the biggest churches and basilicas in the world are compared to St. Peter's. And St. Peter's is huge compared to them. It was really funny to see just how much they're dwarfed. Like, the largest church ended like 30 or 40 feet short at least of the St. Peter's. So it was fun. And also, another thing I've never done before was the tour group went to a winery and they did wine tasting, and I became a professional in water tasting. And I never knew water could taste so good. But it also came with like different snacky foods to try. So it's like you take your water, you'd stir it, you'd sniff it, you'd try it, and then you'd eat it with a piece of cheese or salami. And I must say, it didn't really help the taste in the least. I guess if you were tasting the wine, it would have. And I also had the most amazing balsamic vinegar in the world. It was aged 30 years, and it was the food of the gods. It was the food of the Roman gods. It was so good. And there was also a truffle olive oil, and that was... I didn't know how much I would like it because I've heard the truffles are really strong, but it was almost as good as the balsamic. Like what they did is they poured a bit of the balsamic and the oil onto your crackers and onto your plate. And I spent most of the time taking my bread and just soaking up the balsamic as much as I could, because it was just that good. And my favorite food in Italy was the bistecca a fiorentina, or the steak of Florence, which I had in Florence. I mean, because it's the steak of Florence. And my mom and I got the steak for two, but for my friends, when they got it for the steak for one, it was about this big, about this thick. Like, at least an inch or 2 inches thick. And it was some of the best steak I've ever had in my life. It's not quite as good as my grandfather's. My grandfather makes the best steak in the world, and my cat can attest to that because he loves my grandfather's steak. Mostly just the barbecue sauce on the steak, but he'll sometimes eat the steak as well. But the steak was so tender, and it was huge. My mom and I almost couldn't finish it, and it was two of us eating, and I was starving slowly because I was just waiting as I saw other people's food being served. I'm like, why isn't it coming? It's taking so long. But I was gladly rewarded. And I just forgot to mention, when we were in Cambodia, it was amazing because we got to stay with a family for a night. And it was absolutely amazing. I helped them cook dinner. I helped them clean, and then as you're just looking out on the road, you'll see water buffalo walk by, come up, and they had cows and they had chickens, and everything's just running around, and it was really an amazing experience to be able to go to. And on the trip, we went to a total of 11 countries: New Zealand, Samoa, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Greece, Italy, the Vatican City, San Marino, and we went to Kusadasi in Turkey, just a small city in Turkey. But I didn't include them in this video because they were really small and we weren't able to be in them for too long. But this was San Marino, one of the separate countries we went to. We walked through it, and it took about 3 hours to walk through a whole country. And we were in Kusadasi for about 4 or 5 hours, so it wasn't quite enough time to make highlights or favorites of anything. And the Vatican City, I just included it in Italy because it's in Italy, but it's not that different from the rest of Italy, except for it's full of amazing architecture and everything. And actually, there are 4 basilicas that belong to the Vatican City. There's a St. Peter's in the Vatican, but there's also 3 other basilicas in Rome, and when you go into them, you're officially stepping into a new country, even though you are in Rome. And lastly, I found that Greece really reminded me of where I used to live, in Kamloops. It really reminded me of Kamloops because it was hot and it was dry and it was full of pine trees, and I'm like, this really reminded me of Kamloops. Songs, the ancient architecture, the locals, the totally different language, the amazing food, and the breathtaking views. But everything else is Kamloops. So basically the temperature and the trees. But it was home. And it was probably the most familiar place I went to on the trip, landscape-wise. And the culture was, the culture, I learned on this trip that culture isn't just religion. Culture is everything. It's how you walk. It's how you eat. It's what you eat. It's